Hello ladies and gentlemen, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Cardoodle. This is Jim. Today I'm working on a couple of shots for the next cartoon. I'm working as hard as I can to get this out before Christmas. So just a heads up, I might end up having to skip Cardoodle next week just to give myself more time to work on the cartoon. I'm going to do my best to squeeze it in if at all possible. This next cartoon takes place on Christmas Eve and I'm really just setting up some background scenery. In a little bit you'll see me drawing a full moon because that's what phase the moon will be in December 24th of this year, because I am crazy and for some reason I care about that stuff. Now the inside of this apartment that I'm drawing is actually going to be very loosely based on my own apartment, including our little tiny $20 3-foot tall Christmas tree, which is of course the segue into the random thing I learned this week while working on a cartoon. And that's a little bit about the history of the Christmas tree. Now as it turned out, evergreen plants actually have had special meanings for lots of cultures for thousands of years. In fact, a lot of customs had people decorating their homes with evergreen boughs and shrubs and all sorts of things. It was thought that because these trees remained green year-round that they had some kind of special magical properties so they could ward off evil spirits and the like. You may have also learned that evergreen plants have had special places in winter solstice rituals as a reminder that things were going to get better after the winter and things were going to become lively again. The Romans, of course, had Saturnalia, which honored their god of agriculture, and the evergreen plants reminded them that farms would once again be able to raise new crops, and so homes and temples would be decorated. Even the ancient Egyptians had kind of a variant on this tradition. Now, of course, there are no pine trees in Egypt, but they would instead use green palm rushes as decorations for their homes. But as with almost every tradition that I've gone over in the previous blogs during the Not Christmas cartoon, the modern incarnation of the Christmas tree is credited to Germany. In the 16th century, some Christians would bring decorated trees into their homes and were traditionally decorated with stuff like fruits and nuts, all sorts of edible things. The legend goes that it was actually Martin Luther who thought of the idea of putting candles on trees. The truth of this claim isn't known as far as the research I did. The sources I read seem to imply that maybe it's not entirely known who was the first person to decide to light up a tree. So that's roughly 500 years ago when we start seeing the beginnings of what will become the modern Christmas tree. Now what I thought was interesting was how recent of a tradition the Christmas tree is in the United States. Putting up a tree was considered strange up until the mid-1800s. During the colonization of North America by the Puritans, it was actually, in some instances, considered a crime to put up any kind of Christmas decoration because it was considered a graven image or a pagan ritual. And it's really weird seeing this back and forth between people who really liked the idea of decoration and people who didn't. Like, it seems to kind of be a pendulum that swings both ways during different periods of time. It was only when there was a big influx of German and Irish immigrants in the 19th century that we started to see these traditions really be brought over to the United States in force, which funnily enough kind of circles back around to the kind of tiny little tree we have in our apartment here. I learned that the little 3-foot tree is actually closer to the initial tradition of the Germans than the tall trees that we have here. Like, traditionally you would have maybe a 4-foot tall tree, and for some reason I really wasn't able to find, we just really seem to like tall trees in the US. Now once electricity became widely available, of course the candles were replaced by electric Christmas lights, and all of a sudden you started seeing trees appearing in town squares all over the place. Now of course all sorts of other areas of the world have different traditions. Mexico, for example, the primary decoration around Christmas time is the nativity scene. In Norway, a tree is often decorated behind closed doors as kind of a surprise for the kids. Reading about this stuff has taught me that while traditions are very important, they hold cultures and families together, they change over time. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. I mean, in many cultures, the idea of a Christmas tree in general is less than 200 years old. So as our communities become increasingly global and we start giving and taking different traditions from different cultures, who knows what things are going to be like in 10, 20, 30 years. We'll always be a little bit wistful to maybe have lost things that we had in the past, but I am looking forward to seeing what things look like in the future. As always, thanks again for watching. Remember to like, comment, and subscribe. And as always, do like your mom told you and share. I probably won't see you next week, but definitely will see you in 2.